I'm taking you back to 1971, when then Jimmy Carter was elected governor of the state of Georgia. In his inaugural speech, he called out the need for us to focus on racial justice. He made that speech on a platform surrounded by political leaders who had supported racial discrimination. His bold speech left no doubt that this was a new day for Georgia politics. That speech also made the front page of the New York Times, which noted that the radicalism of Carter's address for a South still deeply mired in racism. The Times called his speech a quantum leap forward in a region, quote, where racial discrimination has been condoned, applauded, and exploited by the political leadership. The courage on display in his inauguration speech eventually led tonight's speaker to the presidency of the United States of America. And in the decades since, that same courage has led him to humanitarian work around the world. Through the Carter Center, he and his amazing wife and partner, Rosalind, who is not with us tonight because she's taking care of the work she does, focused on mental health. Together, they have fought for human rights in numerous countries, and they have confronted some of the most difficult and intractable diseases, diseases that disproportionately affect the poorest of the poor. One of those is guinea worm. Since 1986, the Carter Center has led the international campaign to eradicate this dreadful disease, working closely with ministries of health and local communities, the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the World Health Organization, and many others. Guinea worm disease, by the way, is said to become only the second human disease in history after smallpox to be eradicated. All of that thanks to President Carter and all the people who work there. Yes, you may applaud. What some of you may know and some of you may not know is that it also will be the first disease to be eradicated without the use of a vaccine or medicine. Years ago, I have to tell you the story, when President Carter was visiting a Nigerian village, the local students, just like our students here today, came to greet him, and they held up a sign with a handwritten note on it. Guess what the sign said? It said, "Watch out, guinea worm, here comes Jimmy Carter." Not many people can spearhead a disease eradication project of this magnitude and with such tireless dedication. Here at Emory, we have been spoiled having President Carter on our faculty for many years. We have benefited from a close partnership with the Carter Center, from having President Carter and his wife Rosalind as advocates, teachers, and two wonderful examples of compassion for all. Please join me in welcoming Emory University Distinguished Professor, the 39th President of the United States of America, Jimmy Carter.
Well, thank you, everybody. This is the 37th time I've been before this group, and I come with a great deal of trepidation about the questions I'm going to get. I might say it's the first time in 37 years that my wife hasn't been here, and also the first time that Dooley hasn't been here. And I miss my wife. Well, when the Carter Center goes overseas to eradicate guinea worm or to deal with lymphatic filariasis or onchocerciasis or trachoma or lymphatic filariasis, or when we go to North Korea 3 times or normalize relations with China or do anything like that. We really are representing Emory. And we would like to ask all the Emory students who are no longer sophomores, who are juniors and seniors and later, to consider being an intern at the Carter Center. We just put in an application and we'll consider you very carefully. We have about 100 interns each year by semester, and we would be glad to have more Emory students apply. Dwight Marr here, who's your president, the first president you've ever had who is not an American citizen, he's a Chinese citizen, is here because one night when I was president, we had normalized relations, diplomatic relations with China after 37 years of alienation, and I sent my science advisor over to China to conclude some agreements with the Chinese after we normalized relations. And Dr. Frank Press, who was a geologist, was my science advisor. And I was sleeping in the White House. About 3 o'clock in the morning, I got a telephone call, which is a very rare thing for a president to be waked up in the middle of the night, except for an emergency. And it was Dr. Frank Press on the phone. And I said, Frank, what in the hell are you calling me in the middle of the night for? He said, I'm here with Deng Xiaoping, the Vice Premier of China, and he wants to know if you'll permit him to send 5,000 Chinese students to American universities. And I was kind of angry. So I said, tell him to send 100,000. I slammed the phone down. Well, almost before I was out of the White House, we had 100,000 Chinese students here in America, and now we have had over 2 million, I believe. Is that right? Right? And we have not enough American students in China now, about 25,000. So that's my only opening remark, is to urge you to know that I'm a distinguished professor and proud of it. I've been here for a long time. And whatever the Carter Center does is in partnership with Emory. So, and also, don't hesitate to apply to be an intern at Emory, at the Carter Center. So that's my speech, and now I very reluctantly look forward to the questions I'm going to get from you. Thank you very much.
Good evening, President Carter. My name is Lamar Green, and I'm a senior in Emory College studying human health, and I'm from Richmond, Virginia. Your first question comes from Jessica Echeverria from Orange Park, Florida, and she's a pre-health student in the class of 2022.
Is she here?
Can Jessica please stand? And the question is, what drives you to remain active in your community?
I can't escape from being active. As a matter of fact, I belong to a community that has 600 people in it, Plains, Georgia. I've lived there all my life. I lived next door to my wife when she was born. So when she was in her first day of life, I went next door to see her because my mother was a registered nurse, and she said, there's a new neighbor on the street and you want to go see her. So I went in and looked to the side panels of the crib, and there was my future wife lying there. I don't remember what she had on, but but 3 years is a big difference. So when I'm in Plains now, it's kind of important for the rest of the community. Plains has become kind of a tourist attraction. And we belong to the Maranatha Baptist Church, and I teach Bible lessons, Sunday school lessons, twice a month. When I don't teach, we have about 30 members maximum in our church building, and when I do teach, we have sometimes as many as 700 visitors who come to our church. And usually our sanctuary, the main auditorium of our little church, is full by 5 o'clock in the morning. People start getting there from foreign countries and from other states in the nation, usually by midnight. So you can see I can't escape from my duties in Plains. So it's almost mandatory that I still play an active role in my in my community. We're still in the farming business. Rosa and I, actually, matter of fact, our children and grandchildren own the farm now, and we have had the same land since 1833. So my grandchildren are the 8th generation that's on the same land. So you see, my ties to Plains and to the community are very close, and that's why I can't escape from my home community.
Thank you much for sharing. The next question comes from Elena Chen from Singapore. She is undecided from the class of 2022. Can she please stand, Elena? And the question is, what are your views on the immigration crisis that exists in the United States today?
Well, we should not have an immigration crisis. We should let the young people who were born in the United States or have been here all their lives be automatic citizens, and we should make sure we have a clear pathway for everybody who wants to be a citizen to become a citizen of the United States. So there's no... I have to say, though, that this has been a problem for the U.S. Congress now for a number of years. It didn't just start in 2016. It has been a problem on how to handle immigrants. But I think the basic foundation for all need for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is to treat everyone equally. As I say, I teach Sunday school, so I'll quote one of my favorite verses, and that is that there is no Jew or Gentile. There is no slave or master. There is no man or woman, because all people are the same in the eyes of God. So we ought to treat everybody equally, and that's the basic foundation for the need for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And of course, one of the premises of all the major religions, that is Hinduism and Buddhism, as well as Islam and Judaism and Christianity and so forth, are based on the proper treatment of visitors. And I can really consider that immigrants are visitors of our country who are wanting to become citizens, and we should treat them with a special care and respect as another human being equal to us.
Thank you for such insightful remarks on a human rights issue that affects so many people. The next question comes from James Massacouris from Seacliff, New York, pre-business, class of 2022. Can James please stand? And the question is, what do you view as the single greatest threat facing our generation?
Well, one of the greatest threats is what I just said, and that is not treating other people in our country and in foreign countries as equals to us. But I think more specifically, I would say global warming. I don't have any doubt that the hurricane now on the way to the Carolinas and perhaps to North Georgia is exaggerated in its power and its devastation capability because the oceans are getting much warmer. And when the water in the ocean gets warm, it increases greatly the power of an approaching hurricane. And so we have fires because we have a dry climate, and I think that that's one of the greatest threats to the future. It's pretty certain that along the eastern seaboard, for instance, in another 50 years or so, the oceans are going to rise maybe as many as 6 feet. And if you look at all of the populated areas of the country, most of them are on or near the seacoast, very large cities. Of course, Atlanta's an exception to that, and Denver, Colorado is an exception. But most of the others are subject to flooding. And so we're going to have massive displacement of people and a change in their ability to live in a certain area that's heavily populated now because of global warming. So I think that's something that should be prevented. And of course, we should adhere to the commitments that were made in Paris a couple of years ago so all our countries can come together and deal with global warming. And that's one of the things that China and India are continuing to do, and of course Europe is continuing to do. But as you well know, our own country has withdrawn from the Paris Agreement. And I think that's a very serious mistake, and perhaps it will be a mistake that will cost even some of you young people now, before you're gone, the adverse or devastating or maybe life-giving consequences of global warming.
Thank you. The next question comes from Ellie from Vermont, class of 2022. Is Ellie in the audience? And the question is, what's the most influential message anyone has ever given you?
I think the one single message that has had the most effect on my life, and I would say beneficially, was given to me by my high school teacher. Her name was Miss Julia Coleman. And she used to tell us young people in Plains, Georgia, we must learn to accommodate changing times, but cling to principles that never change. And I think that's been the best and most valuable advice I've ever gotten. So we know that we're in times now with cell phones and television and so forth, things that I didn't have when I was a child. I didn't have electricity or running water either when I was growing up. But anyway, we have much greater access to one another now. So we have to accommodate to those changing times and build our lives around them because they're inevitable. But we have to, each one of us has to appeal to our religious faith or to some other set of moral principles and define or identify certain principles in our life that never change. I would say one of them is telling the truth. Another one is being nice to your neighbors. Another one is being committed to freedom. Another one is democracy. I had a lot of high points of my faith when I was growing up. First I believed in my mother, and then I believed in my daddy later on, and then in my two sisters who were contemporaries of mine. And then I went into the Navy, and I believed in the principles of the Navy. At the Naval Academy, they taught us that the highest measure of morality and ethics was whether or not you were truthful. And if a midshipman at the U.S. Naval Academy made a misleading statement, you were gone. You were out of the academy. They didn't have any trial or anything else. You were just gone. And so I learned quite early to tell the truth. So I think each one of us has to define in our own lives and in our own freedom the principles that we want to cherish and observe in our own conduct. And so I think that accommodate changing times, cling to principles that never change is the best advice I ever got in a single statement.
The next question comes from Jake Bush with Facebook. Can Jake please stand? And the question is, what can and should we as college students do to defend learning and intellectualism in an age of fake news, alternative facts, and constant assaults on science and the academy coming from the government and all parts of society?
Well, if everyone on earth adopted as one of the unchanging principles, telling the truth, you wouldn't have to worry about fake news and alternative facts. There's only one really foundation for truth or facts, and that is what actually happened or what is going to happen. And so it's very difficult sometimes, even in our own private lives, to make a habit of telling the truth. But I would say that's one of the things. But I think all of us in this country need to have confidence in the future. I would say freedom is one of the great gifts that God gives us all. He gives us life. He gives us freedom. I won't go into other things because I'm not in church, but let me say that freedom to make your own decisions is a very important factor. And I would say that the group of people in our country, or in other countries as well, who have the greatest degree of freedom is college students. And you might deny that at first, but you're no longer under the direct control or even heavy influence of your parents, probably, when you're at Emory. And you haven't yet undertaken the responsibilities of a future job. When you get a job for Coca-Cola or in a law firm or a teaching school or something like that, then you're going to be subject to the influence of your bosses, or the ones that can affect your future. If you're going to get married, you're going to be under the influence, I would say mostly beneficial, of your wife or husband. So before you undertake a job and while you're at college, you have the greatest degree of freedom in your life. So this is a time for you to shape the future and to define, to repeat myself, some of the principles in your life that will never change, and adhere to them. So use your freedom, and you can explore other ideas now that you won't be able to do in the future because you have classmates that have different ideas. And so on a college campus, I would say, is the greatest element of freedom you'll ever have in your life.
Thank you. And the next question is from Abby Elizabeth on Instagram. And the question is, what was the most memorable day of your career?
The most memorable day of my career, my life, was when my wife said she would marry me. Because I started dating Rosen when I was an upcoming first-classman or senior at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis. And that the next February, she came to Annapolis to visit me. It was Washington's birthday. And I asked her to marry me. And she said no. And then she and I have different versions of what happened after that. But I think she went back home and she started dating all the other boys in the county to find a better match. And finally, in May, she changed her mind and said, okay. And in May, when she said yes, that's the greatest day of my life. And it affected my life in totally beneficial ways. So we've been married now for 72 years. And so maybe you can see why that was such an exciting day for me. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing such a touching story. The next question comes from Angelique Gomez from San Mateo, California, studying nursing in the class of 2022. Can Angelique please stand?
Angelique.
And the question is, if you could be president again at this time, what would you choose to implement or change and why?
If I were foolish enough to think I could be president again, and I got to be president, I think the first thing I would do would be to change all of the policies that President Trump has initiated since he's been in office. I have to say that as a Christian, I pray for President Trump. I pray that he'll keep our country at peace, and I pray that he'll promote human rights. I pray that he'll be successful in eliminating the threat of nuclear attacks from North Korea. So I pray for him fairly regularly. But if he complied with my prayers, if he answered my prayers, he'd have to change a lot of things. But anyway, I hope he will do well, and if he's finishes out his first term. Of course, I won't be voting for him, as you probably have already guessed. But while he's in office, I hope he'll do a good job, or a better job.
The next question comes from Lisa Emerson from Conover, North Carolina, who is a second-year MSPH student. Is Lisa in the audience?
She's aware.
Awesome. The question is, after you finish eradicating guinea worm, what are you going to take on next?
Well, we still have, in the whole world now, 11 cases of guinea worm. We had 30 cases last year, including 15 cases from Ethiopia. This year we have 0 from Ethiopia, but we still have 11 cases, so we still have a long way to go. We had 350,000 cases to begin with, and so we, one by one, in villages in 21 countries, we've eliminated guinea worm. But we don't have any problem about deciding on other diseases, because we also deal with lymphatic filariasis, which is elephantiasis. It's when your arms and legs and sexual organs swell up to grotesque sizes. We deal with 2 eye diseases. One is river blindness, and the other one is trachoma. And we deal with other diseases as well, malaria and so forth. But at the Carter Center now, we have the only task force in the world, about 12 members, who analyze every human illness constantly to see which ones might theoretically be susceptible to elimination from a particular country or region of the world, or in the biggest case, to be eradicated from the entire world. So we have a list of diseases that we know already based on scientific evidence and discovery and latest developments might possibly be the next diseases to be eradicated. So we have a constant waiting list for us to tackle them. But it takes a lot of money and a lot of effort. We've been working on guinea worm now for about 35 years, as a matter of fact, and we still have a few cases left. And as you know, they've been working on polio even longer than that. The Carter Center is not directly involved with polio, but we hope they'll be successful. And it took smallpox a long time as well, so it's not easy to eradicate a disease completely. Now we have a problem with animals, because we've just recently found that in guinea worm areas, some countries that never had guinea worm for 20 years, we found guinea worm disease in dogs and cats and baboons and monkeys. And so that's a problem we haven't yet overcome, but we are working on it. So I don't have any doubt we're going to get rid of guinea worm. I pray in my lifetime, and we'll have plenty of other diseases waiting for us to work on after that time. Thank you.
The next question is from Claire Conroy from Maryland, pre-business class of 2022. Can Claire please stand? And the question is, are you a feminist? And if so, where do you stand on the hashtag #MeToo movement?
On what stuff? Oh, okay, heard you. All my life, I have been dominated by women. And it's been a voluntary thing on my part. My mother was a very powerful influence on my life. She was a full-time registered nurse, and she helped raise me. And of course, Rosen, ever since then, has dominated my life for the last 72 years. And so when I got to be governor and president, I was pretty well trained on how to treat women with complete equality. And I've just quoted to you, I think, a minute ago, one of my favorite Bible verses, that there's no difference between men and women in the eyes of God. When I had a chance to appoint federal judges, for instance, when I left office after 4 years, I had appointed more women federal judges than all of my predecessors in history combined. And my wife and I were in the forefront when I was in the White House of getting past the Equal Rights Amendment, which I still believe should and will be passed by the Congress and the people of America in the future. So I would say, even my wife's not here, I am a feminist. And I say that with a great deal of pride. Not apologizing, I'm very proud of it.
Thank you. The next question is from Sunwoo Park from Seoul, Korea, who is a student at Oxford studying political science in the class of 2021. Awesome. And the question is, what do you love most about Emory?
Well, first of all, although I've been here for 37 years and have written 32 books, I'm still not a tenured professor. But despite that, I came to Emory when Jim Laney was president, immediately after I left the White House. And I was offered a chance to be a distinguished professor by the Board of Regents. At that time, Georgia had 30 colleges, and they wanted 33 colleges, and they wanted me to be a distinguished professor for the entire state with a small salary and that sort of thing. But I decided to come to Emory because of the quality of education here, the high standards here, the degree of freedom that exists on the campus, and because Jim Laney promised me that I would never be censored while I was a professor at Emory. And I never have had the slightest restraint put on what I say, and as you know, I speak quite freely. I hope I've proven that tonight, but I also have had a very good relationship with Emory at the Carter Center. So everything we do at the Carter Center, which obsesses my life and my wife's life as well, is a full partnership with Emory. So Claire Sturck has been just as good a partner with us as all the rest of them. She's one of the trustees of the Carter Center. As a matter of fact, half the trustees that we have at the Carter Center are appointed by Emory, and the other half are appointed by us at the Carter Center. So we can't escape from Emory if I want to, but I never have wanted to. So I'm very proud to be associated with Emory. I consider it would be one of the greatest honors of my life to be anointed as a distinguished professor at Emory. And I never have been disappointed. Thank you very much. By the way, let me add one thing to the last question. 4 years ago, I wrote a book about the discrimination against women. And at that time, our human rights branch of the Carter Center did an analysis of all the human rights violations on earth. And we came to a common and unanimous consensus that the greatest single discrimination on earth, the greatest violation of human rights on earth, is the discrimination against women and girls. So that's been one of our major commitments ever since. And we'll continue with that until the equality of men and women have been proven. You might be interested in knowing that our best allies in this worldwide effort to equalize relations between men and women has been with the leaders of the of the Muslim community, the Islamic community. So we have in Africa a great and wholehearted cooperation between imams or Muslim leaders who actually go back with our urging and study the Quran, and they see, just like the Quran does, that the Bible also has verses, if carefully selected, that would cause on you to discriminate. But when they study the Quran more deeply, they find almost unanimously that women should be treated equally in the Muslim world as well as the Christian world. So we're still working on that, still have a long way to go.
The next question is from Joy Knowles from Kansas City, Kansas, a freshman in the College of Arts and Sciences. Can Joy please stand? And the question is, how do you personally balance your religion with politics? To what extent should religion be considered when making political decisions?
I've been a state senator, I've been governor of Georgia, I've been president of the United States, and I've never found any incompatibility between my political philosophy or morals and ethical standards and my religious beliefs. I never have found any incompatibility there. And so I think that once somebody decides to pick out those principles that guide you, then they can be applicable or very important in the decisions whether you're working for a law firm or in business or community or teaching school or being a doctor or a nurse, no matter what you do, or in politics. So there's no difference, I don't believe, in my religious faith and my belief in the principles of Jesus Christ or in the Constitution and the laws of our country or in the Universal Declaration of Independence. I don't see any incompatibility among any of them. I think they're all the same. Thank you.
The next question is from Jake Eisenberg from Pembroke Pines, Florida, second-year law student. Jake, can you please stand? Okay. And the question is, can you talk about an especially meaningful memory you shared with Senator McCain and what we can learn from his lifetime of service to this country?
With whom?
Senator McCain.
Well, yes. As a matter of fact, Senator McCain and I went to the same school. I graduated from a Naval Academy long before he did. My oldest son, Jack, was a student at Georgia Tech, studying nuclear physics, and when the Vietnam War started, he volunteered to go to Vietnam, and he came home safely. Senator McCain learned the same principles in the Navy that I learned and from the same instructors and the same standards at the Naval Academy. So I've always been proud of the fact that Senator McCain, who's one of my heroes, had the same kind of schooling that I did. So I would say that the thing that has bound us together, all the way from different political parties, was that we believe in the same principles of conduct and ethics and morality and telling the truth that we learned at the Naval Academy. So that's the thing we have in common.
The next question is from Chloe Hilkema from Seneca, South Carolina, history major, class of 2022. Chloe, can you please stand? And the question is, my dad is a U.S. history teacher in a public high school, and you are his favorite president. Who is your favorite president?
During my lifetime, my favorite president was Harry Truman. He was a very modest man, a very courageous man. He inherited the White House, obviously, with the death of Franklin Roosevelt. He didn't expect to. But Harry Truman was the president when I was on a submarine in the U.S. Navy. And Harry Truman made a very important decision. I would say 7 or 8 years before Martin Luther King Jr. or Rosa Parks enunciated the basic principles of racial equality, Harry Truman ordained as a commander-in-chief of the military and the leader of his civil service in the government that there should be no discrimination on any ship or in any company or in any aspect of the military between black and white people. So with a stroke of the pen as commander-in-chief, he eliminated the then prevailing discrimination against black people that had been in effect for almost 100 years, since the war between the states or the Civil War. So I admired him for many ways, and when I was in the Korean War during the Vietnam, when I was still in submarines, and I think that he made the right decisions, and he was a commander-in-chief in whom I had complete confidence. And I thought he was a modest man. I don't think he ever told a lie. I don't think he ever stole a penny. I think he was an honest and very courageous and a very wise president. So he's my favorite during my lifetime. If I went back in history, obviously I would be talking maybe about George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and others. But since I've been alive, I would say Harry Truman is my president.
And the next question is from Yuri Brunner from Frederick, Maryland, a freshman in business. Yuri, can you please stand? And the question is, given your experience in handling foreign crises, what is your opinion on how our current president is dealing with North Korea?
Well, I believe that so far, the president has handled the North Korean situation properly. I'm very glad that he met with Kim Jong-un and that they worked out a verbal arrangement without any specifics in it. And the option is still open between North Korea and the United States to have a complete understanding, although that hasn't happened yet. I think that President Trump exaggerated the agreement that he had reached. I don't think that Kim Jong-un has ever committed himself to doing away with nuclear weapons completely or actually denuclearizing. But I think that's still a possibility, and as I said earlier, I pray that he'll be successful there. I've been to North Korea 3 times already. I met with Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-un's grandfather and the founder of the North Korean government. And I worked out a complete deal with him, and I found out then and in my other 2 trips that what the North Koreans really want is to have a peace agreement with the United States. They want to see an end to the Korean War. As you know, at the end of the Korean War, we never had any peace agreement. We just had a ceasefire, and the ceasefire is still prevailing. And since that time, the United States has done everything we possibly could to destroy the economy of North Korea with embargoes and so forth. We've done everything we could to boost or improve the economy of South Korea. And still we condemn North Korea because their economy is not good. So I think that the North Koreans are eager and were eager when I went over there, my first trip, and my other 2 trips as well, to have peace in the world. They want to be treated like every other country on earth, but they've been singled out since the Korean War to be punished as severely as we possibly can by the United States. So that expresses my true feelings. I think that having an embargo against North Korea that affects the people of North Korea is a mistake. I've written an op-ed piece about this that was in the New York Times last year. So I think we've done the same thing with Cuba. So now, almost 70 years, we have tried to hurt the people of North Korea as well as the leaders. I think when we have an embargo or trade sanctions against another country, it ought to be devised so that we only punish the leaders in charge. Because when we do otherwise, in Cuba and in North Korea's example, we give the leaders who are abusive and sometimes very serious human rights violators the chance to say, well, the economy is not bad because we have a communist system here, but the economy is just bad because we can blame it on the United States. So I think we ought to reach over backwards to give the North Koreans a chance with a full peace agreement to get rid of our nuclear weapons. And I have a belief, just based on my leaders with the top, my meetings with the top leaders, that they would be willing to do that. I don't know that yet, but I hope it'll be true. And I think that President Trump has done a good job in at least making that a possibility.
The next question is from Jake Anstey from Seattle, Washington, a student in the class of 2022. I'm sorry, Jack. I apologize. And the question is, 2 generations from now, what do you want to be remembered for?
Well, 2 generations from now. Well, I would like to be remembered as a champion of human rights, and I would like to be remembered as a president who kept our country at peace and promoted peace for everybody else in the world with whom we had contact. and I would like to be remembered as having been a distinguished professor at Emory University.
We appreciate all your insights tonight, but we have reached our final question, which is from Brian Wong from Camas, Washington, biology class of 2022. Brian, can you please stand? And the question is, President Carter, as a previous peanut farmer, do you prefer crunchy or smooth peanut butter?
Well, I have to say that I prefer one and my wife prefers the other. For sandwiches, I prefer creamy peanut butter. And for, just munching during the day, like on a cracker or something like that, I prefer crunchy. So, but my wife always likes crunchy peanut butter. So you can see that both my wife and I love peanut butter, and I hope that you all will do the same. Thank you very much for treating me so well tonight. I appreciate it.